So, is there a God? And by a God, I mean a all-powerful, all-good being who created the world, or even a very knowledgeable, very powerful, very good being who created the world. There is a type of argument that says no, there either definitely isn't a God, or there probably isn't a God. So let's think through these versions of this argument called the argument from evil or the problem from evil. The first version says that, well, if there were a God, then there would be no evil or bad things in the world at all. But there are evil things or bad things that happen in the world. So it concludes there is not a God. Now, why think that if there were a God, there would be no evil or bad things whatsoever? Well, the common claim is if there were a God, they would know about these bad things, be able to prevent these bad things, and would want to prevent these bad things. And so there would be no bad things. So this version of the argument is called the logical argument from evil. It claims that God and evil or bad things are logically incompatible. If you have one, you just can't have the other. The problem with this argument is that it seems pretty bad. Why is that? Well, it seems like if there were a God, that God could allow and would allow some evil, some bad things. Why is that? Well, the simplest idea might be sort of the idea of no pain, no gain. There are various goods in the world, goods that we experience, that if we couldn't experience any bad things, even tiny bad things at all, we just couldn't get those goods. So for that reason and others, people tend to think that the logical argument from evil is a pretty bad argument. There's a harder version of the argument that says it's more complicated, and it says this. Well, if there were a God, an all-knowing, all-powerful being, then any evil that happens, any very bad evil or very bad things that happen, greater goods would come from those evils, and they would be greater goods that not even God could achieve or bring about without those initial evils. So why think this? Well, basically the idea is, if you were to allow some bad thing, very bad thing to happen, you would only allow that to happen if greater goods came from it, and those greater goods you just couldn't get without the evil. So if there were God, there wouldn't be these types of evils, but there are these types of evils. Evils, bad things that don't seem to lead to greater goods, or if they do lead to greater goods, it seems like you could get those greater goods without such horrific evils. And so they conclude that probably there's not a God. Now, this is not a claim that God and evil are logically incompatible. It's just that God's existence is good evidence, or evil is good evidence that there's not a God. So this argument needs to be thought about much more carefully.